The air in Blackwood Manor tasted of old dust and newer despair. It was a flavor Inspector Merrilini knew well, the cloying sweetness of inherited grief, now curdled by sudden violence. He stood in the library, a cavern of leather-bound silence, where the only testament to chaos was the body of a young man, Alexander Blackwood, sprawled like a broken marionette before a gargantuan oak desk. A single elegant revolver lay near his right hand. The scene was a masterpiece of tragic implication, a composition screaming suicide. And like all masterpieces, Merrilini thought, it was a lie. His external goal was simple: determine the truth of Alexander's death. His internal need, the one that gnawed at him in the quiet hours, was to find order in the universe's inherent chaos. He believed human malice, for all its horror, was a predictable, solvable equation. It was his central flaw, this clinical detachment, this view of people as variables in a grand, morbid formula. It made him brilliant and utterly alone. The primary force of antagonism was not just the unseen murderer, but the elegant fiction they had constructed. The perfect, self-contained narrative of suicide was a wall Merrilini had to dismantle, brick by logical brick. A conflict that forced him to move from seeing a mere puzzle to understanding a person's destruction. The assembled heirs were a study in strained patience. They watched him from the hallway, a gaggle of black silk and somber suits, their faces masks of sorrow painted over raw avarice. The reading of Silas Blackwood's will had been imminent. Now it was postponed by a greater finality. "It's obvious, isn't it?" snapped a tall, gaunt man with eyes like chips of flint, Caleb, a distant cousin. The pressure of the inheritance. The boy couldn't handle it, a tragic weakness of mind. Caleb stood to inherit a significant, though not primary, share, a clause activated only if Alexander was deemed mentally unfit or deceased. The local constable nodded, eager to close the book. "Fingerprints are only his on the gun. Door was locked from the inside. It's open and shut, Inspector." Merrilini didn't answer. His mind was already dissecting the scene, measuring the angles. He moved with a quiet precision that unnerved the others. He noted the precise positioning of the body, the entry wound, the lack of powder burns, at a range that should have produced them. His eyes, pale and analytical, scanned the room, dismissing the obvious, seeking the aberrant. Then he saw it. A faint, almost microscopic smudge on the dark varnish of the windowsill. Not a fingerprint, but a linear abrasion, a tiny scar in the wood. It was out of place, a wrong note in the symphony of false perfection. He knelt, his own reflection a ghost in the rain-streaked window pane. His gaze traveled from the smudge, up to the heavy velvet curtain rod, then down to the desk, and finally back to the body. In his mind, the room transformed. Lines of force and tension superimposed themselves over the physical space. He saw it not as a static picture, but as a dynamic event. "Constable," Merrilini said, his voice quiet but slicing through the room's thick silence. "Was there any water damage on the desk? A small circular patch of condensation?" The constable blinked. "Well, yes, but the housekeeper wiped it up, said it must have been from a glass." "There was no glass," Merrilini stated. He turned to the heirs, his gaze settling on Caleb, who held his stare with a defiant rigidity. The murderer was clever. They used a complex system of wires, a counterweight, and a block of ice. A ripple of disbelief went through the crowd. Merrilini began to reconstruct the crime, his voice a calm, relentless drone. The killer entered earlier, perhaps to offer condolences. He fixed a fine, strong wire to the curtain rod above. He ran it down, looped it through the trigger guard of the revolver, which was set upright in a block of ice on the desk. A stable, temporary platform. The other end of the wire was attached to a counterweight, hidden behind the curtains, holding the entire apparatus in a state of tension. He then positioned Alexander, either coerced or already unconscious, in the chair, his head aligned with the barrel. He walked them through it, step by logical step. The locked door was a misdirection. The murderer left via the window, which locks from the inside with a simple latch. He closed it, but not fully. Then he waited. As the ice melted in the warm room, the platform destabilized. The counterweight dropped, pulling the wire, which pulled the trigger. The gun fired, the force jerking it from the melting ice and onto the floor near the victim's hand. The wire, released from the weight, was drawn up and out through the barely open window by the remaining counterweight, leaving behind only that single telltale smudge on the sill as it snapped tight and was retrieved. The room was utterly silent. The perfect suicide had been deconstructed into a premeditated, mechanical murder. "But why?" Alexander's fiancée whispered, her voice breaking. "Who would do such a horrible thing?" "The why is in the will," Marilyn said, his eyes still on Caleb. "The method was chosen specifically to suggest mental instability, a convoluted suicide, the theatrics of it. It was meant to point away from murder and towards a broken mind. But the geometry betrayed you," he finally addressed Caleb directly. "The smudge was too high, the angle too precise. It spoke of an external force, not an internal collapse. You needed him to be seen as unstable or dead to claim your share. You counted on the obviousness of the scene to blind us to its mechanics." Caleb's face, for a fleeting second, was a canvas of pure, unadulterated rage. Then it collapsed into a mask of weary defeat. He said nothing, but his silence was a confirmation louder than any confession. As Caleb was led away, the chaotic human emotions of the room, the sobs, the shocked whispers, washed over Marilyn. He had solved the equation. He had found the order in the chaos. But for the first time, the solution felt hollow. He had not just uncovered an mechanism, he had unmasked a profound human cruelty. His clinical flaw had served the truth, but it had left him standing alone in the aftermath, surrounded by the wreckage of lives, the cold comfort of logic his only companion. He looked at the now empty space where Alexander had lain, the geometric lines of his reconstruction fading from his mind's eye, leaving only the stark human truth of a life ended for money. The case was closed, the puzzle solved, but the victory tasted of ashes. He had proven his theory of the universe, and found it, and himself, wanting.